Welcome back to The Long Game. I'm Jay Roberts. Today I'm joined by Commissioner Vicki Lopez, who represents Miami-Dade County's District 5, covering Brickell, downtown Miami, Little Havana, Miami Beach, and more. During her time in the legislature, Vicki was the House sponsor of the Live Local. She's also spearheaded condominium reform in the wake of Surfside, helping rewrite the state's condo safety and reserve requirements. Earlier this year, Vicki was named the Miami Association of Realtors 2025 Housing Advocate of the Year. In this episode, we talk about the affordable housing crisis, public safety, the future of transportation in Miami-Dade, and what it's like moving between state and county government. Vicki, thank you for coming on the show.
I'm very delighted to be here with you, Jay. Thank you.
You have quite the career, and you went to Notre Dame, you went to business school. Not many politicians went to business school. How did you get into public service and government work, and how has your business school degree helped you in your service?
So that is a really good question because I'm so grateful to have a business background. Not only, I had an accounting degree from Notre Dame, and then I was a licensed investment banker. So I really understand.
What firm?
They were both small firms that were correspondent branches of Payne Weber.
Okay.
And it was in the 80s when we were seeing a lot of flight capital coming from South America and people wanting to invest here. So I have been able to marry those skill sets, certainly in local government. And I'll explain how that has sort of made its way. But first I'll get to why, and how I got into government. So I was actually working here in Miami as an investment banker, and then went home to help my dad with his business. My dad was actually he was a Section 8 landlord, very involved in affordable housing. And there was a vacancy in the Lee County Commission in 1990. And so some Hispanic leaders came to our house and said, we think Vicki would be great for that position. I'd never even thought about politics, although I had grown up in a home where my dad had done a lot of community service. And so service was always part of our narrative, but I had never thought about running for office. And so, my dad said, what do you think? And I said, boy, it sounds interesting. I've never shied away from a new experience. And it was interesting because at the time, the establishment decided on a different candidate for that position, which would have been the one that corresponds with where I grew up and lived. So then there was this encouragement to move into another district that had a very popular two-term Democrat incumbent. And I beat him by 504 votes. And that began my journey in government. And so I did that for a term, and then I moved to Washington, D.C., where I started lobbying on some of the issues that I was seeing as a county commissioner. And then one thing led to another, and I worked for Governor Bush for a stint doing some criminal justice reform, but always housing was always a part of what I was doing. I worked for an affordable housing company in Washington, D.C. that had the owner had been an undersecretary of HUD under Jimmy Carter for multifamily housing. So housing always seemed to intersect in my world in some way. And so that's how I got started in politics. But my latest stint was, again, business leaders encouraging me to run for the Florida Senate when then Senator Taddeo resigned her seat to run for a higher office. And once again, the establishment chose someone else. And then I was encouraged to move to the Florida House, where I ran in a very competitive Democrat seat. It was a D+10 seat, meaning 10% more registered Democrats than Republicans.
Wow.
And I won that seat and flipped that seat.
What year was this?
That was 2022.
Okay.
I flipped that seat that the Democrats had held for 16 years by 825 votes. So it has been a pattern of mine to win seats, and I think that speaks to who I am, because all of these seats have been very bipartisan seats, really left-leaning, but because of the way that I have governed, which means I'm really a very nonpartisan person, which is why the county commission is best suited for me. And so that's how I found myself in the Florida House. And then, as you said, when we opened the segment, then I was appointed to the county commission. So I'm back in local government, but it's a place that I really do love.
You're back in local government. How does the local community and the county differ from working in Tallahassee?
Oh, wow. It's so different. So very different. I don't know that my constituents even knew who their state rep was. I do know that I have been very different from, as a state legislator, I had a district office and soon I got rid of it and I made it a virtual one because I was constantly in the neighborhoods. And I really do believe that government should go to the people. The people should not have to come see me in my district office. And even today, we don't have a lot of people that stop into my district office. And that's because we are constantly in the district, which is where I think, is the similarity. It's just that the demands for my time are much greater now at the local level. When I was working on housing and condo reform, I was quite busy, obviously, because those were two very critical issues in District 113. But what I find, though, so very different. I was one of 120 members of the Florida House. We have one speaker. He leads the chamber. He makes the decisions about everything. Which bills, will be heard, which bills will go on the floor. So there is this notion that you are one following one leader, right? Especially if you are a member of the governing caucus. Now, as a local county commissioner, I recognize that I don't have anyone above me. I am the de facto speaker for District 5. I make all the decisions about what ordinances I will file, what issues I will work on, and also how I defend District 5, right? Like, it's different when you are only accountable to the voter. I'm not accountable to anyone, not to the party, not to a governing, presiding officer.
The people in your district.
Yeah, the people in the district are the people that I'm working for now. And although I always worked for them, there was a hierarchy, a power hierarchy in the Florida House. Here, I am that. I am, and I like to say to people, I'm like a warlord, one of 13 warlords, all defending our kingdoms, if you will. And so that is very different, but it's very empowering.
And Commissioner, you're very visible in the community, meeting with community members, meeting with your constituents. What's on their mind? What are they focused on? What are they concerned about?
So the number one issue, no matter what part of my district I'm in, is housing affordability. I really believe that we had a little bit of a housing crisis prior to the pandemic that got exacerbated by the influx of people from other states that came here because we were open. They were also coming to Florida somewhat with their salaries from the states in which they came from. So California and New York are two of the largest states that have sent us what I consider to be refugees. And
I'm one of them.
You are definitely one, Jay, and we welcome you, and others, obviously, because you have contributed greatly to the economy, which was why Florida was flourishing during the pandemic, because we only closed for 3 months.
Right.
But what I find is that the exasperation of these housing affordability, and I always use my housing as an example. When I first moved in 10 years ago to my condo on Brickell, I was paying $1,850. Today I pay $3,150, and that jump of $1,000 or $1,500 happened all in a 4-year period, and that was during the pandemic and then post-pandemic, right? That is that's expensive for people who were always living in Florida because their salaries did not increase with the cost of living. Yet, people that were coming from other states, I have an 800 square foot condo on the water. That in New York would have probably been a $7,000 a month. I was only paying $2,000 a month.
Right.
So bidding wars began as well. And so now no one can afford to live here other than those that are making a lot of money. So I have a lot of, and it's across the board.
How do we fix that?
So, it's been almost my mission for the last 4 years about how we fix it, right? I think you have to incentivize developers to build housing for those that can't afford to live here, right? So there's no shortage of luxury buildings going up. And quite frankly, if you build it, they will come. And they're coming from all over the world now. During the pandemic, it was really they were coming from all over the country. But you have to look at the geopolitical landscape across the world to see what happens when people start to get nervous about what's happening with their governments and they're trying to protect their capital, right? So there's been a lot of capital influx again, as it was. I'm almost seeing it play out as it did in the 80s. As the governments in South America began to become unstable, flight capital arrived in droves.
This is happening in
It's
Europe.
happening again, and not only in Europe, but in the Middle East. So I guess I'm seeing that the solution has to be, first of all, incentivize developers because they don't have to build affordable housing. And by that, there's this misnomer about affordable versus workforce. I know the legislature moved to really talking about workforce because during the pandemic, there was what was known as the missing middle. There's plenty of funding for affordable housing as we've known it traditionally, right? But there wasn't for those that were our police officers, firefighters, nurses, and teachers, all of them working. But I think the legislature may have made an error in the area median income that they focused the Live Local Act on. So we focused on the 80 to 120% AMI, but quite frankly, very few people fall within the 80 to 120% AMI in Miami. And so oftentimes the argument is that that's really market rate because most people are in the 50 to 60% AMI. And the industries that I just referenced are around 60%. 60%. So we have to build more inventory. It's like we said, economics 101. Yep. The more the inventory we have, the market will adjust and housing will become more affordable.
There's a misnomer that developers are building and only for themselves.
Correct.
And you studied business, I studied economics in school. The more supply, you lower the prices.
Correct.
So the more building is more choice for the consumer, for the buyers, for the renters, and that lowers the prices. So to fix the affordable housing crisis, we need more affordable units. We need more attainable housing. We need to be able to rent to the first responders, to these very important people in our community, the firefighters, the teachers, the nurses.
But that also translates to the college graduate who can no longer afford to live here. So they grew up here, they were educated here, and now must leave here. So we're having somewhat of a talent drain because I'm hearing it from parents who would have preferred that their children stay and work and prosper here. But it's becoming impossible for them to do so unless they live at home. So now there's this notion that you can't even afford to purchase a house or a condo. And there are a lot of reasons for that, but not the least of which is that the pricing has gone up. And people say to me, "Are we living in a bubble?" And I say, "No, the market is actually adjusted and is continued to be stable at these higher prices, much like New York is. Right? We used to say no one can live in New York unless you live there and make a lot of money.
Right.
It's happening in Miami as well. And so it's affecting my elderly population. It's something that I just recently discovered. I'd been very focused on high rises within, transit zones, right? Where you could build lots more housing.
Rapid transit zoning,
Certainly,
RTZ.
the rapid transit zones for me and transportation networks have always been sort of my focus. But just currently, when I have about 30 to 32 senior buildings in District 5, most of them are either on public housing programs or on Section 8 programs. What I am recognizing is the federal government has a recipe for failure. Here's what's happening with those programs. They are a developer is permitted, or an owner of a building is permitted to increase the rent up to 7% a year. But the Social Security that they're living on does not increase 7%. So by year 3, I have elderly people, and I'm talking about people that are in their 80s and early 90s, who are finding they cannot afford the rent.
And they need the help.
They need that. So what I'm discovering as well is that one of the ways in which we can incentivize developers is to allow for mixed income in one building.
Yeah.
So you can have people at the 30% AMI, although I'll tell you, we used to say that our elderly were at 30%. I've now looked at the new AMI charts. They're really at 20%.
Wow. Their
Social Security has not kept up with the cost of living, predominantly here. We have so many elderly people on a waiting list for even to get government assistance for housing. So that worries me because we have to incentivize the developers to actually produce senior housing. But we've also the mixed income, and this is one of the things the Live Local also allowed, is you can have rental units and condominium units in the same building so that you could have luxury high market And that helps to subsidize the lower 80 to 120% AMI that you have to be focused on to do a live local.
Commissioner, let's talk about Live Local.
Let's do.
A bill that you sponsored. You really believe in this. I believe in this. This is one of the best pieces of housing legislation in the country. It's very common sense, and you do have to incentivize developers because all business, there's economics.
Yes.
There's a cost to doing something, and then there's a revenue, and that has to make sense. As developers, as a developer, I like to say it has to pencil.
Yeah, that's what we say, that if the deal doesn't pencil, it doesn't get built.
Exactly. And so your role in Live Local, let's talk about the legislation, how it's evolved, and how it benefits the community.
So, originally, this was a high priority bill that was written by the president of the Senate, actually Kathleen Pasadomo, who's a land use lawyer from Collier County. And it was her priority bill in the 2023 session, and she traded that. There are political nuances about how bills get passed in both the House and Senate. She traded that for the Speaker of the House at the time's priority bill, which was a social media bill. So the way that happens is we'll take your bill without any revisions, and you'll take ours. And you'll pass ours off your floor, we'll pass yours off our floor. It's a definite horse trade. It was a significant piece of legislation, which when it became time to put it into practice, needed a lot of work. The first year, I was just the prime co-sponsor, meaning that as a freshman, my name was on the bill, but there was a sophomore at the time from Miami, Representative Demi Busada, who was really the true House sponsor who moved it. But the House was not permitted to make any revisions, amendments, nothing. So it just went through the process, got on the floor, passed, and that was the end of that. By the second year, the Speaker asked me to lead it, and I said to him, I would like to make some amendments because oftentimes one size doesn't fit all. So I started to see, environmentally sensitive lands where we shouldn't allow it, or specific unique situations like the historic preservation districts in Miami Beach. And to his credit, Speaker Renner allowed me to make some of these amendments to the bill. My bill got passed off the floor first, and the way it works is whoever passes it off first sends their bill over, and they're supposed to pick up, the other chamber is supposed to pick up that bill for messages. The Senate president was not pleased that I had made amendments to her bill. And so she sent back a message to Speaker Renner that she was going to pick up my bill, strip it from all my good amendments, and pass what she wanted to pass. And I think it was the first time that I realized that the political sort of structure often doesn't permit someone who's trying to lead housing, certainly in this case, good housing policy. There are challenges and there are restrictions between the presiding officers, right? But by the third year, she was no longer Senate president, although she remained in the Senate, which was yet another challenge. I was allowed to make some revisions and some good amendments, and those did pass the Senate. And by the fourth year, unfortunately, I was not there for the 2026 session, but even better amendments were made that I tried to make in the former years, like the fair housing. Like there have been municipalities that have absolutely put in writing, we don't want affordable housing in our city. That's a direct fair housing discrimination. And so now we've lifted the sovereign immunity of any city, because political subdivisions have sovereign immunity up to 250,000, and that too has changed in the legislature now. The levels of which local governments could be sued for is now much higher. So the bill.
So to translate this for our listeners, you've improved the clarity of the Live Local Act.
I have, and I've tried to carve out where necessary for very unique communities like Miami Beach. Because remember, I represented the mainland, I represented the urban core, and Live Local worked for my district in District 113. But now I represent the beach, and although I didn't represent the beach at the time, I was sensitive to the fact that it is a unique community, and their commission really had some issues with it, and we tried to adjust it to really preserve the historic nature of South Beach. So, and I pledged to do more of that. Where we can, we should amend the bill to speak to specific situations, right? because one size doesn't fit all, and that certainly has played itself out across the state.
It's great legislation, and hopefully it gets adopted faster so we can provide more of this affordable housing to the communities. You've also done great work on condominium reform.
Yes.
And we had a tragedy here several years ago in Surfside.
Yes.
How was your work on that reform? What were some of the requirements that you implemented?
So I actually led that work in the legislature and was affectionately known as the condo queen for the hard work that I did. So basically, the unfortunate tragedy where 98 residents lost their lives in Champlain Towers was as a direct result of the building not having any reserves to keep it structurally sound. And that unfortunately, look, for anyone who lives in a condo, and it's really vertical living that we're talking about, it was clear that the legislature never really focused on it. There was only like 2 or 3 of us that lived in condominiums, to be honest with you, of the 160 that make up both the House and the Senate. Their housing policy has always been focused on single-family housing or duplexes or townhouses, right? Now 98 people lose their lives, and the spotlight, I mean, it was huge. It shifted to condominium safety. And I know that the Speaker and the President of the Senate pledged never again to have a building, really to just completely fall in the middle of the night, killing 98 innocent people. So the bill was actually very simple. It required, we identified the 8 structural components that make a building safe. So it required that there be a structural integrity study done every 10 years to actually estimate what those structural components repair or replacement would be over that 10-year period. And you had to reserve for those. That was non-negotiable. Because in the prior to Champlain Towers, the statute said you should reserve, but you could waive reserve.
Okay.
Right. And of course, everyone took advantage of that because if you have to increase the reserves, you're increasing the monthly condo fee.
Right.
And so for many, they said, listen, if you have a condo board, you're just saying, we don't need to increase condo fees. We want to make it so that it stays kind of either stable or increases just very little.
Right.
So we took that from them. They could no longer waive the reserves for the 8 structural components. The other thing we said was you now had to, Miami-Dade and Broward County were the only counties out of the 67 counties that were actually inspecting buildings, but they were doing it every 40 years. Champlain Towers collapsed at 38 and a half. Wow. So we decided, had it been 30 years, maybe we would have caught all this. Yeah. And in fact, we have seen that. So now you have to do a milestone inspection at the 30-year mark and every 10 years thereafter. You'd be surprised how many condo buildings after that law was passed where we had to immediately evacuate them. Yeah. And not here in Miami-Dade, but in other parts of Florida. So that's what it did. Those were the 2 things it did. It demanded and required an inspection be done. But I'll tell you that if you live in Brickell, you're seeing a lot of scaffolding around the buildings, and you're not seeing it at 30 years. You're seeing it between 15 and 17 years. And why? Because they're having to do concrete restoration. And that is because saltwater intrusion is real. Yeah. And no one knew that before, right? So all of the condo buildings on the coastline of Florida are subject to saltwater intrusion. And so, unfortunately, what you're now seeing is what's known as special assessments. And that is because it's a repair that you could not have estimated while you were doing your budgets. And that has also caused a lot of problems because people are being asked to pay sometimes tens of thousands of dollars and sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars to meet their special assessment. So what the legislature did in the sort of subsequent years was to say, look, instead of increasing reserves, you can take out a credit line in the total amount of what your structural integrity reserve study says. So you always will have the money there when you need it. But I used to say to people, it's either pay now or pay later. Yeah. Because you're not going to escape having to maintain your building. And then it occurred to me that condos that used to be so affordable for young families and elderly people that were retiring turned out to be not so affordable. Yep. Because we were living in an illusion that if you don't reserve, then the condo fees never go up. Right. Today, and thankfully, people used to ask me, should I buy a condo? I said, wait until the law goes into effect completely. Then you will know what it costs. And in many cases, to own a condo, your monthly condo fee is more expensive than your mortgage.
Yeah.
So does condo living then become more luxury living? Probably, because people have to understand that you're maintaining a building.
You have to maintain
You have to maintain it if you want to be safe. And the legislature took that very seriously.
The governor has put forth the elimination of property taxes
He
for
has.
over 90%.
Yep.
There's a lot of controversy on if that's good. Will that eliminate first responders, budgets for the cities to take care of many of the important things? Your view, and again, protecting your constituents and protecting seniors, what are your thoughts on property taxes?
So I've always said that my seniors are the ones that need the relief the most. Anyone over 65 that's living on a retirement definitely has seen a huge increase in their property taxes, and it has created havoc for them because remember that our Save Our Homes keeps their property taxes increasing only 3% every year. If they leave their home, which they have outgrown, by the way, they will then, to buy something else, they have to start from scratch with the Save Our Homes, right? So their property taxes can go up even more if they move. So what do I have? I have a situation that's kind of somewhat of a crisis, another housing crisis. Elderly people can't leave their homes to move into smaller places to make room for young families who need the house that they're living in now, right? So this notion that we should get rid of property taxes across the board, I think is drastic. I do understand that there is a need for relief. I also understand that government spends too much money. And I don't disagree with those that support the elimination of property taxes, saying you're spending money on things we don't care about.
Right.
So here's what the property tax bill does. Not only does it define what, the limits, the homestead exemptions, the one that will be on the ballot on November says that the first year it will be $150,000 for your homestead exemption, and the following year it will be $250,000. That doesn't really make a dent here in Miami-Dade because there's no property that's worth $150,000 or $250,000, right? That would eliminate it. But when you go across the state, the rural communities, you will see a complete elimination of property taxes for those communities. That's a problem for the rural communities because we have right now, there are 27 rural counties that all of us, are subsidizing because they don't have a tax base, and yet they need a government. So you may see those counties having to collapse into maybe, getting together, maybe 4 counties become one. For municipalities who have no commercial base, that could in fact make them have to roll back into the counties in which they find themselves. So for me, I think there has to be a balance. Yes, we have to reduce property taxes. There's no question in my mind. But government also has to reduce its spending. And the property tax bill now says that any balance that you will have from the property tax revenue can only be spent on core essential services. So the question now is, they've defined those core essential services in statute, not the least of which is obviously public safety, our bond interest payments, education. But what happens to arts and culture, parks, libraries, and everything else that wasn't defined in the bill?
Right.
That's something that we have to tussle with now. We have to implement user fees, which, is yet another tax. Although I will say, I remember elderly people saying to me, if I don't use that park, why am I being charged for it? So you go back to, if you want to use it, you have to pay for it. I don't know what the solution's going to be. And again, I'm only one of 13. But I believe this budget cycle will be very difficult, followed by 2 very difficult ones as we implement, should it pass. It's going to need a supermajority to pass. 60%. So I think in this case, we just have to wait and see. But we have to all get prepared for having less, doing more for less money.
And Commissioner, you have an election coming up.
I do.
And we wish you well. And,
thank you.
Assuming you win, what would you like to accomplish in your next term?
I definitely want to focus. I've noticed I've already created a housing stakeholder community, as I did in the state. So now I've called together housing advocates, developers, capital markets, because you cannot do policy without looking at the financing and how it intersects. And we're looking at the county code. That county code has not been updated in many years. So it doesn't really reflect the current state of our housing crisis. So I've already begun the work that I hope to continue to do and finish when elected, because it's important that we now think out of the box. And luckily, our Housing and Community Development Department is a good partner of my office, and we are all looking at ways to sort of think out of the box. Identifying first what are the real major issues in terms of housing here, and then thinking about ways in which we can amend the code, and then also making a list of ways that we can amend state statute. So I'm very excited about continuing the housing work, because it's the number one issue that I hear across the district.
In addition to housing, transportation, hospitality, tourism, we have traffic on the streets, and we also have more and more people coming to Miami because it's in Florida because it's such a great destination. What are your thoughts on expanding the airport?
So, the airport needs a lot of help. I represent the seaport, which is also running out of space. And so we're having to look at ways in which we move cargo off the island itself, off-site, to make more room to increase the number of economic activities that can take place on the port. On the airport side, I mean, it needs a lot of repairs, what we've noticed. Obviously, if you go to the airport, you see that the escalators aren't working, that there's leaks coming down. I mean, I think if we want to be a world-class city, we have to have a world-class airport. And there is talk about expanding the airport to Tamiami, to the Tamiami airport. And I don't think that that's a bad idea. Chicago has two airports. O'Hare is the main principal airport. Midway is in the south, and acts as a very, very, I think, another yet alternative and option, which has helped alleviate a lot of the challenges that O'Hare had. So I look forward to seeing more about what that option looks like. I know it's just being bantered about now, but I think it's going to be a good thing for Miami-Dade, and transportation in general. So, what I noticed as a state legislator, I was on the Transportation and Modals Subcommittee, and every time that the Department of Transportation would make a presentation to the committee, it only talked about roads. And I would raise my hand and I would say, Secretary, let me explain to you that I represent the urban core of Miami, and we don't have any more space for new roads or an expansion of roads. You need to start talking about transit, which is very different than transportation. The challenge on the beach, where I represent, is there was a unanimous resolution passed by the City Commission not to have Bay Link go from the mainland to just south of 5th. The south of 5th residents were all unanimously opposed to it, although there was support for it in the residents in Mid Beach, North Beach. So that is not an option anymore. So now we have to think out of the box. There's the water taxi. Should there be, I hear all kinds of different solutions to try to ease the transportation challenges that we're having from the mainland to the beach. And that's also intersecting with housing. Because if people could work and live on the beach, then there wouldn't be that mass traffic that there is in the morning and then again in the afternoons. But, we have to figure out ways. Listen, transit is super expensive. We have a SMART plan. I know that Commissioner Gilbert asked for what is the cost of each of the components of that SMART plan. We have to do better, because no one can build transit or even a road anymore without the participation of funding from FDOT, from the state, and also from the local community. So setting priorities is going to be a very interesting task that's going to be before the commission, because naturally everybody wants a piece of that money for their district. But the question always has to be, where is the major traffic coming from? We have to solve it without being district, centric. That's what I really think we need. At the state, we do that because we have to look at the whole state. I think as county commissioners, we're so used to being very district centric that when you come up with the very large issues that affect the county, you have to kind of set aside what you want for your district in what is the best for the greater good, and the greater good has to be countywide.
That makes a lot of sense.
Well, hopefully I can convince my colleagues of that.
And Commissioner, you represent the seaport,
I
which
do.
has a huge economic impact here in Miami. What are some considerations, and how is taking on that endeavor?
Well, we just recently had, a vote on the fuel farm.
Yeah.
If you don't fuel the cruise ships and the cargo ships, you will not have an economic engine. And quite frankly, neither one of the industries have to be at our port. They can move very easily, which would destroy, everything is connected. The airport receives passengers that then go to the port for a cruise. If something happens to the economy or the industries on that port, it will impact the airport. It will have a trickle effect. And I think it would be an
And the
economic
hotels
disaster.
and the restaurants.
Everything. And that's really the tourism side of what's happening. We're the number one cruising capital of the world. We don't have to be. The cruise ships can go to Port Everglades, just up the road where they would be welcomed. So that fuel farm was.
This is on Fisher Island.
This is on Fisher Island and has been there for over 50 years, right? We discovered there was a covenant on the land that does not permit it to be used by anything other than industrial for a utility purpose, right? So when the owners purchased that property, I think they thought, well, the commission has the right to take the covenant out, so we'll just rezone it, without recognizing that we would be stuck with, then what is the alternative for fueling? And so anyway, the actions that the commission took before I arrived was not only a resolution to try to negotiate with the current owners, but also then a month later to move forward with eminent domain. So all we did was, kind of reiterate the eminent domain last week, and that's where we're at now. But that really plays into the future, because truly, I mean, I have Terminal G that's being built now, and more terminals to come, double A on the other end. So we are expanding, but that also exasperates transportation issues. Remember, all the cruise ships come into port at the same time. So there's a mass exodus of people off the ships, and then they're either taking a ride share, a taxi, or someone's picking them up. They are all exiting the port and dumping into Biscayne Boulevard, which is already a nightmare because of the Signature Bridge, which is now 7 years delayed. So it's creating a transportation nightmare for the urban core. So if you live downtown, you're not happy because you're saying every time cruise ships come in, it creates a problem for us. The Signature Bridge has created an even bigger problem, and that's the exit. And that impacts the islands, Star, Hibiscus, and Palm Island. The only way out of those islands is to take 395 and exit on either continuing onto 395 or exiting on Biscayne Boulevard. Right. On any given day, that's a mess. So now my constituents that live on the islands cannot really leave their homes between the hours of 2 and 7. Now, how crazy is that?
Yeah, that's very tough.
They've become prisoners in their own homes due to the fact that transportation is still a challenge. So there's no shortage of challenges that I will have to face as a county commissioner, but the one thing that I'm committed to doing is to listening to my residents and working hard to find solutions and negotiating with everyone who is part of that solution, network.
Commissioner, you said that politics is a long game.
It is a long game.
It is a long game. There's a lot of considerations. There's a lot of people to make happy, to try to make happy. There's a lot of problems and challenges to solve. You're doing incredible work. What would you like the listeners to, what do you want to leave the listeners with?
Well, I mean, I guess I would say one is, I'm already on the job, demonstrating that I can do the job and want to continue. So I respectfully, want to earn their vote on August 18th. That's important because in order to continue this work, I will have to continue as their county commissioner. But I do want them to also understand that I'm here to serve them. And I have a team that backs, District 5. If you have an issue, if you have a suggestion, because some of the greatest things that I've done have come from suggestions from constituents, right? Like I cannot do this job on my own. I think that, it's a we, it's not an I. For me, it's about what does the community need? I listen carefully, and then I bring all the parties together. And hopefully from that, I act as a great consensus builder, but I also act as a collaborator and a negotiator. And, nothing is black and white. We have to negotiate solutions.
Right.
And everyone should be at the table because every voice matters. And that's what I want everyone to know. No matter who you are, if you work and live in District 5, your voice matters to me and my team. And we want to hear from you. That's important.
Commissioner, how do your constituents get in touch with you?
So listen, there's many ways. We have social media. We have, obviously, they can call the district office. They can come to a commission meeting, which is always, I encourage everyone to either look at the commission, and then if you see something that you don't like or that you liked and you want to see more of, you can reach out to us. I mean, it's very easy. You just go online and you go to the county commission, and there's all the information for my office. So we encourage people to also follow us on the social media. It's important because that's where we're doing a lot. Like, for instance, we're launching our mom and pop grants for small businesses, right? If you were following me, you would already know that. And if you were a small business that's been in business in Miami-Dade for a year, you can apply for up to a $1,500 grant to help you do maybe something new. Maybe expand your social media, right? Things that help. And I'm also profiling small businesses in my district, because I want to use my social media as a way of helping others. So it's not only helping small businesses, it's about letting people know what services are out there for them. So that I want to encourage everybody, reach out.
You can go on the website. You can follow Commissioner on her social media. They're definitely checking it. Commissioner, thank you for being on the long game.
Thank you so much. Really appreciated the opportunity to speak with you, Jay.
Awesome.